Chosen one, there are moments when life no longer asks for explanations, only recognition. You have reached a point where you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. What was done, was done. What was lived, left marks. And what was closed can no longer be reopened. Even if some try to move on, something inside them still echoes. Because certain presences do not go unnoticed, and certain departures are never ordinary. You were not just someone who was there. You were a turning point. Your way of existing, feeling, and acting activated deep layers in the people who crossed your path. Some understood. Others resisted. But all of them felt it. And that is why, even in silence, your name still appears in the thoughts of those who believed you would be easily replaceable. Your greatest victory was not staying where you were not valued, but leaving without destroying your own essence. You ended the game when you chose yourself. When you decided to no longer explain yourself, no longer beg for space, and no longer shrink your truth to fit into small stories. That was the move that changed everything. A silent but definitive move. Now, while some still revisit the past trying to understand where they lost control, you have already moved forward. Not with arrogance, but with awareness. Not with revenge, but with clarity. The game ended the moment you stopped betraying yourself to maintain bonds that were draining you. And when that happens, there is no return. You got there. Game over. What remained was learning, growth, and a strength that no longer depends on anyone's validation. And that, in itself, is unforgettable. Chosen one, there are people who pass through the lives of others like brief chapters, easily forgotten over time. But you were not like that. You were a landmark, a breaking point, a before and after that cannot be erased, even when they try to move on. Your presence left emotional, spiritual, and mental records that remain alive because they touched places too deep to be ignored. You got where they said you would not get. Not because you wanted to prove something, but because you decided not to abandon yourself anymore. While some believed you would remain stuck in cycles, you moved. While they expected your surrender, you matured. While they bet on your silence as weakness, you turned it into strength. And that changes everything. They cannot forget you because you represented something rare. Authenticity in a world of games, truth in an environment of masks, depth in shallow relationships. When someone encounters this and loses it, the loss is not only of the person, it is of the experience. It is the feeling of being before something real, and that leaves a void that is hard to fill. You did not need to shout, accuse, or take revenge. Your evolution was the clearest answer. Your withdrawal was the final message. Because when someone realizes they have lost access to someone who really mattered, they begin to revisit every detail, every conversation, every decision. Not just out of nostalgia, but out of belated awareness. You made your mark because you did not try to shape yourself to please. You did not diminish your essence to be accepted. You did not negotiate your dignity to remain. This choice is rare, and everything that is rare leaves absence when it goes away. They feel it because they know it was not easy to replace you. They know that what you offered was not common. Your presence activated growth, even if some resisted. You awakened questions, mirrors, and discomforts that many preferred to avoid. And when you left, you did not take only your company. You took the stimulus, the truth, and the possibility of something deeper. That is why the silence that remained is so loud. You did not leave defeated. You left whole. And leaving whole from a place that tried to fragment you is a silent victory that echoes for a long time. The game began to change the moment you realized you no longer needed to fight to be seen. It was enough to withdraw with awareness. And when you do that, something ends definitively. There is no emotional return. There is no true reconnection. There is no way to pretend that nothing happened. Because you were not a detail. You were the highlight of someone's story. And highlights are not forgotten. Chosen one. Most people were prepared to see you insisting, trying, explaining yourself, or adapting once again. They were ready for the same cycle to repeat. What no one predicted was your clarity. Your decision to leave without scandal, but also without return. That was the move that changed everything. Your departure was not impulsive. It was built in silence, layer by layer, until the moment came when staying meant betraying yourself. And when you chose yourself, something broke forever. It was not only the external bond that broke, it was the dynamic of power, control, and expectation that sustained that relationship. They were not prepared to lose access, to realize that you would no longer be emotionally, energetically, or spiritually available. They were not ready to understand that you did not need to close doors in anger for them to remain closed. You closed them with awareness, and that is definitive. Your absence began to speak louder than any word you could have said, because when you no longer react, no longer explain, and no longer return, the other is forced to deal with the emptiness. And the emptiness reveals everything that was neglected while you were present. They began to remember details that before seemed common. The care you had, the way you listened, the depth of the conversations, the genuine giving. Because only in absence do many recognize the real value of what they had. And when that recognition comes too late, it hurts. Your definitive move was not to beat someone. It was to defeat the fear of being alone. It was to break with the need for validation. It was to choose your own peace, even without applause. And that choice completely changes the energy of the game. Those who remain stuck in the past feel it. Those who move forward consciously advance. They look back because you are no longer accessible, because you have changed emotional and spiritual levels, because what you offered cannot be easily replicated, and because deep down they know that the story ended not for lack of feeling, but for lack of alignment. You ended the game the moment you stopped negotiating your truth. And when that happens, there is no rematch, no continuation. There is only learning for those who stayed, and freedom for those who left. You got there. Game over. And they know it, even if they never admit it out loud. Chosen one, there is a kind of silence that does not mean absence of impact, but definitive presence. It is the silence of someone who understood they no longer need to explain, justify, or convince. When you went quiet and moved on, something changed deeply in the dynamic between you and those who stayed. The silence you left was not empty. It was a constant echo. They expected a reaction, a return, a sign of doubt. They expected you to break, to feel the absence, to show regret. But what they found was something they did not know how to deal with. Your peace. A peace built after much inner struggle, many concessions, and many attempts to remain where there was no longer reciprocity. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces the other to think. When you stop responding, justifying, and insisting, the mirror appears, and not everyone is prepared to face their own reflection. Your silence made them review words, attitudes, decisions, and behaviors. Not because you asked, but because your absence created space for awareness to act. You did not need to say you were tired. You did not need to point out mistakes. You did not need to demand change. Your departure was the message, a clear, mature, and impossible to ignore message. Because those who leave in silence but remain whole leave questions that do not find easy answers. They try to move on, but something always returns. A memory, a comparison, a sense of loss they cannot explain. It is not attachment only to your person. It is to what you represented, to the level of giving, truth, and presence they have not found again. Silence also marked the end of the emotional game. When you stopped reacting, feeding conflicts, and participating in exhausting cycles, you removed the energy that kept that dynamic alive. Without you there, everything lost strength. And that is hard to accept for those who believed they would always have access to you. You did not disappear. You repositioned yourself. And repositioning is something that cannot be undone. You did not close the door with noise, but with awareness. And doors closed like that do not reopen out of curiosity, neediness, or momentary longing. This silence is remembered because it was not born from indifference, but from maturity. You felt, you suffered, you reflected, and you decided. You did not leave at the height of emotion, you left at the height of clarity. And that echoes. It echoes because there is no way to distort the narrative when the truth was sustained until the end. Your silence continues to speak because it carries coherence. It says, I tried, I stayed, I learned. Now I move on, and this sentence does not need to be spoken out loud to be heard. Chosen one, when you left, you did not leave just an empty space. You left a standard, a level of presence, awareness, and truth that became a reference. And that is exactly what makes it impossible to forget you. Because after someone experiences something genuine, everything that comes after feels incomplete. You were not perfect, but you were true. And truth creates lasting impact. You did not offer games, you offered depth. You did not offer empty promises, you offered presence. And when that is lost, there is no easy replacement. There are attempts, comparisons, and frustrations. They can meet new people, create new stories, and try to follow different paths. But something always sounds different. Something is always missing. Because what you gave came from a rare place, authenticity. And that cannot be manufactured, copied, or found on just any emotional corner. You became the standard without trying to be. It was not something forced. It was a consequence of who you are when you are aligned with yourself. And high standards are uncomfortable because they reveal how much someone accepted less than they deserved or offered less than they could. They remember because you did not demand, you inspired. You did not charge, you awakened. Your presence provoked growth, even if some resisted. And now, without you there, this absence becomes a silent comparison. You do not need to compete with anyone's past, because the past in which you were present has already become a reference, not out of vanity, but out of truth. And that weighs. It weighs because it shows that the loss was neither small nor replaceable. While some are still trying to understand where they went wrong, you have already understood where you needed to leave. And this difference in awareness creates a distance that cannot be shortened. You are not above, you are beyond. Beyond the game, beyond the need for validation, beyond repetition. The standard you became does not require public recognition. It lives in memory, in comparison, and in late awareness. It lives in the perception that certain connections once lost do not return at the same level. And most importantly, you did not become this standard to be remembered. You became it to be free. The remembrance is only a consequence of having been faithful to yourself until the end. You do not need to look back. The echo stayed there. You do not need to prove anything. The absence has already proved it. You do not need to go back. The game was over the moment you chose not to diminish yourself anymore. And when someone becomes the standard, there is no forgetting. There is late learning for those who stayed and conscious progress for those who moved on. Chosen one, there comes a moment when going back stops being reconciliation and becomes regression. and you have already passed that point. Everything that needed to be understood was revealed in the silence, in the attitudes, and in the choices made when no one was looking. You did not leave to provoke longing, you left to preserve your essence. Going back now would not prove maturity, it would prove doubt, and you no longer live in that place. The clarity that led you to leave is the same that keeps you distant. There are no more open questions, only answers that were accepted internally. And that is enough. Many people confuse longing with regret, but not all longing asks for return. Sometimes it only confirms that something was valuable, and something valuable does not need to be relived to be recognized. What was true fulfilled its role. What did not evolve was left behind. You do not owe any more explanations, because you have already given more than you could. You do not owe more presence because you already gave yourself fully where it was possible. You do not owe more effort because you already tried beyond the healthy limit. The ending was not escape, it was self-respect. Going back would be ignoring everything you learned. It would be pretending there was no where, no signs, no moments when you had to be silent so as not to lose yourself. You did not leave out of pride. You left out of emotional and spiritual survival. Your absence is consistent with who you have become. You are no longer that version who accepted less, who waited for crumbs, who over-adapted. Growing also means recognizing that certain chapters do not ask for continuation. They ask for closure. And the closure has already happened. Internally, energetically, and consciously. There is nothing pending, just memories that confirm that you lived in truth as far as it was possible. That does not generate guilt. It generates peace. You do not need to go back to be remembered. You are already remembered. You do not need to return to validate your importance. It has already been felt. You do not need to reopen doors to prove maturity. Maturity was leaving without destroying. The game ended the moment you chose not to abandon yourself anymore. And that is non-negotiable. Chosen one, while some are still revisiting the past, trying to understand what happened, you are no longer there. Not because you forgot, but because you evolved. There is a deep difference between denying the past and integrating it. You integrated, you learned, you grew, and you moved on. You no longer carry the same expectations, nor react in the same way, nor get involved with the same energy. Something in you has matured, and when that happens, there is no way to return to the same emotional level. Not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. Some look back because they are still stuck at the point where everything stopped. Others move on because they understood that staying there would be repeating themselves. You chose to move on. And moving on requires courage, because it implies leaving the familiar, even if it no longer serves you. You changed phases because you stopped romanticizing what tired you. You stopped justifying what hurt you. You stopped insisting where there was no reciprocity. This kind of maturing does not happen by chance. It is born from processed pain, not avoided pain. While some still try to understand you, with the old version they had of you, you have already become someone different. More aware, firmer, more whole. And this creates a natural mismatch. Not everyone keeps up with the growth of those who choose to wake up. You do not need to announce your change. It is perceived in the way you speak, in the way you position yourself, in what you accept, and in what you no longer negotiate. This change does not ask for external validation. It sustains itself. And that is why some feel it. Because you are no longer available in the same way. You do not react as before. You do not get involved as before. You do not give yourself as before. You did not shut down. You refined yourself. While some still look back trying to understand where they lost, you look forward building something new. Not out of revenge, but out of alignment. not out of pride, but out of self-respect. You did not walk away gaining someone. You walked away gaining yourself. And that is the victory that changes everything. Chosen one received this with clarity and calm. The game is over. There is no emotional overtime. There is no spiritual second half. What needed to happen, happened. What needed to be learned was learned. What needed to be closed was closed. You are not carrying invisible pending issues. You are carrying maturity. You are not carrying open wounds. You are carrying scars that no longer hurt. That is a sign of real closure, not denial. The game ended when you stopped proving yourself, justifying yourself, and adapting beyond what was healthy. It ended when you understood that love without respect does not sustain, presence without reciprocity exhausts, and insistence without alignment hurts. Now you walk lighter, not because everything is easy, but because you no longer carry what is not yours. Not because you forgot, but because you integrated. Not because you defeated someone, but because you defeated old patterns within yourself. The freedom you feel now did not come from outside. It came from the inner decision not to abandon yourself anymore. And that decision changes the course of life. It redefines relationships, choices, and paths. You do not need to look back to confirm anything. The past has already fulfilled its role. It brought you here. Now, the future asks for presence, not comparison. Awareness, not repetition. You got there. Game over. This sentence does not speak only of an end, but of a complete crossing. It carries the weight of everything that was faced, endured, and overcome in silence. Getting there was not luck, nor chance. It was the result of resilience, difficult choices, and above all, the courage not to give up on yourself when it would have been easier to get lost. Getting there means having gone through phases in which no one applauded, in which few understood, and many doubted. It means having continued even when the path seemed confusing, even when the answers did not come, even when tiredness screamed louder than hope. You got there because you decided to keep going, even without guarantees, even without clear promises of reward. The game over does not represent someone's defeat, but the end of a cycle that had already fulfilled its role. It is the closing of emotional games, silent disputes, constant attempts to prove worth. It is the moment when you understand that you no longer need to convince, insist, or explain yourself. The game ends when awareness takes control. You got there when you chose your peace instead of conflict, your truth instead of forced adaptation, your dignity instead of staying in places that diminished you. This arrival was not loud, but it was definitive. There were no fireworks, but there was clarity, and clarity changes everything. Game over also means that you no longer carry the weight of what if. You no longer need to revisit the past, trying to rewrite endings that were already decided. What was done was enough. What was given was true. What did not bloom was not meant to remain. Ending is an act of maturity, not of coldness. Getting there is realizing that you are no longer the same person who entered the game. You came out transformed, more aware, firmer, more whole. Not perfect, but aligned. And when there is internal alignment, there is no room for deep regret. There is learning. There is integration. There is progress. The game ends when you understand that some victories are not visible to the eyes of others. They happen inside. They are victories over old patterns, over the fear of being alone, over the need for validation. They are silent but powerful victories, because no one can take them from you. You got there because you chose to grow, even when that meant losing people, old versions of yourself, and expectations that could no longer stand. And that is not failure. That is evolution. Now what remains is not emptiness, but space. Space for new phases, new connections, new choices made from who you really are today. The game ended because it no longer made sense to continue. And when something no longer makes sense, ending it is not loss, it is liberation. You got there. Game over. And from here on, everything that comes will be built with more truth, more awareness, and more peace. Getting this far does not mean that everything was easy, nor that all the pain has disappeared. It only means that you did not stay where you no longer fit. It means that at some point, you chose to stop fighting against yourself and decided to move on with more truth. This decision changes the course of life, even when no one notices it immediately. Ending a game is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of lucidity. It is recognizing that not every game deserves continuation, and that not all staying is synonymous with victory. There are cycles that need to end so that the soul can breathe, so that awareness can expand, and so that the heart can beat again without weight. You have the courage to end it, and that requires maturity. Now, the past no longer holds you as before. It exists as learning, not as an anchor. You no longer need to revisit old scenes looking for answers, because the answer has already been given in the way you chose to move on. The peace that begins to arise is the confirmation that the ending was necessary. What comes from now on does not need to be rushed. It does not need to be proved. It does not need to be announced. It will be built at the pace of your clarity, your awareness, and your integrity. You no longer walk to please. You walk to respect yourself. And that changes everything. The game is over, but your journey continues, now on another level. A level where you do not diminish yourself, do not over-explain yourself, and do not negotiate your essence. The space that remained is not emptiness. It is fertile ground for something more aligned with who you have become. Move forward calmly. What needed to stay, stayed. What needed to end, ended. You got there. And now you walk free, aware, and whole.